Rugby is a sport that seems to embody everything traditionally associated with masculinity: strength, aggression, camaraderie, and physicality. In many ways, it's the perfect backdrop for exploring queer themes, especially within the lens of characters grappling with their identity in environments where expectations of gender and sexuality are rigidly defined. What happens when the body, conditioned by a hypermasculine sport like rugby, must also navigate the vulnerability of same-sex attraction? This tension between the demands of the sport and the internal struggle of identity creates compelling drama. Across film and TV, rugby has become more than just a sport. It's become a metaphor for the battles queer individuals face within and outside themselves. By looking at how rugby is portrayed in a few media programs, we can see how the sport has shifted from a symbol of repression to one of inclusivity within queer narratives.
It's because I love you.
I grew up in Australia and first came across the novel Holding the Man in high school. The popularity of the book saw it be adapted into a play and then into a feature film. The film was released in 2015 and was directed by Neil Armfield. The Google plot synopsis is as follows. Tim, played by Ryan Corr, and John, played by Craig Stott, fell in love while teenagers at their all-boys high school. Their romance endured for 15 years to laugh in the face of everything life threw at it. The separations, the discrimination, the temptations, the jealousies, and the losses. A fun fact is that I was actually cast as an extra in the Holding the Man feature film, though I doubt you'll be able to see me. Within the film, which is based on the 1995 memoir by Australian writer, actor, and activist Timothy Congreve, rugby plays a pivotal role in shaping the early relationship between Tim and John. Interestingly, the title itself, Holding the Man, is a rugby term used to describe an illegal move where a player holds an opponent who doesn't have the ball. In the context of the film, this becomes a poignant metaphor for Tim and John's relationship, an emotional and physical connection that goes against the rules of society's expectations in 1970s Australia. The setting of early scenes of Holding the Man at a Catholic school adds an extra layer of repression, as the religious environment frowns heavily upon homosexuality. The school's rugby team, where John shines as a star player, becomes a hyper-masculine space where conformity to rigid norms is expected. Rugby serves as a metaphor for conformity and masculinity, where queer identity is not just discouraged but actively hidden. Rugby within this setting is a hyper-masculine space that amplifies the character's internal conflicts. Following Holding the Man, the film Handsome Devil, directed by John Butler and released in 2016, also uses rugby to represent masculinity and conformity within a religious school. However, it pushes the symbolism even further by elevating the sport within the boarding school to a place where it is practically worshipped. In Handsome Devil, rugby doesn't just symbolize physicality and strength. It embodies the moral expectations of what it means to be a proper man. Ned, the film's protagonist, played by Finn O'Shea, is an outsider in this world, openly disdainful of rugby. His disinterest isolates him in a school where athleticism and masculinity are everything. Meanwhile, Connor, played by Nicholas Galitzine, the star player hiding his sexuality, is trapped by the oppressive atmosphere. The film uses religious language to emphasize this. Rugby here is almost a form of worship, and deviating from the rules is seen as heretical. The rigid environment reflects how queerness is viewed not just as unacceptable, but as sinful. Where Holding the Man used rugby as a background for repression, Handsome Devil goes further, depicting rugby as an oppressor, both physically and symbolically. The school and its rugby culture have become almost cult-like entities, demanding total adherence to traditional masculine ideals. Any deviation is a direct challenge to the moral and social order. Connor's internal struggle within his sexuality is heightened by his environment, and the film critiques how damaging such spaces can be for queer individuals. A more recent entry into queer rugby narratives, In From the Side, released in 2022 and directed by Matt Carter, takes this tension to an entirely new level by situating its story within a gay rugby team. The film follows Mark, played by Alex Lincoln, and Warren, played by Alexander King, two players on a London gay rugby team, as they embark on a secret love affair, both juggling their relationship and the close-knit dynamic of their team. What's interesting about In From the Side is how it directly confronts the intersections of sport, queerness, and the complexity of relationships. Here, rugby isn't just the backdrop for queer identity. It's a shared space where queerness is normalized, but the conflicts come from within the queer community itself. The sport provides the structure, but it's the emotional and romantic entanglements of the characters that drive the story. Rugby becomes a metaphor for the push and pull of commitment and desire, team loyalty, and the search for identity, all within a space where queerness is openly embraced but still fraught with personal challenges. Released in the same year as In From the Side, Heartstopper, written and created by Alice Oseman, takes a more optimistic approach, showing that rugby can coexist with queerness without conflict. The series follows Charlie Spring, played by Joe Locke, an openly gay high school student, and his growing relationship with Nick Nelson, played by Kit Connor, the school's star rugby player. Heartstopper flips the script on traditional queer sports narratives by showing rugby as a space where Nick comes to terms with his bisexuality while continuing to thrive in the sport. Instead of reinforcing masculinity as a barrier to queerness, Heartstopper celebrates the coexistence of both. Nick's journey isn't about rejecting rugby or the masculine norms associated with it, but about embracing his athleticism and his queerness with joy. While rugby provides a compelling setting for the exploration of queer identity, it's worth examining the limitations of using it as a consistent metaphor for masculinity and repression. Initially, I considered focusing on swimming, a sport that arguably appears most frequently in queer films, but I ultimately chose rugby for its unique associations with masculinity and team dynamics. Rugby, like football or other team sports, can sometimes become shorthand for masculine space, where queerness must be hidden or fought for. This trope risks reinforcing the idea that queer narratives are most interesting when framed around conflict with heteronormative structures. However, as shown in Heartstopper and In From the Side, the potential exists to move beyond this trope. Nick's journey is not defined by his rejection of rugby or masculinity, but by his acceptance of both his athleticism and his queerness. This suggests a future where rugby is simply a part of queer characters' lives, not a source of conflict. Films like In From the Side hint at a future where queerness and rugby, or any sport, are seen as coexisting elements in diverse identities. What I find particularly fascinating about rugby in queer cinema is how it's used to explore different aspects of queer experiences across various social and cultural contexts. It's important that we see and understand its early appearances as a symbol of repression and celebrate its transformation into a space of inclusivity and self-acceptance. These narratives and their evolving symbolism reflect the growing complexity of queer experiences within traditionally masculine environments, showing that queer identity can thrive in these spaces rather than be stifled by them. As queer cinema continues to develop, we can anticipate even more diverse and empowering representations of queerness in sports, moving beyond old tropes and embracing new narratives of joy, community, and identity.
Yeah, you see, he's a rugby player, so believe me, my friendship would be a hindrance.
It's quite a persecution complex you got going on there.
Thank you.